Kristyn Decker is the founder and director of an organization called Sound Choices. She is the author of a book called 50 Years in Polygamy. Kristyn is also a radio show host. Yes, I'm the voice behind the camera. It's our honor today to have author, radio show host, Kristyn Decker. Welcome, Kristyn.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good to be here again.
It's wonderful to have you because you bring so much enlightenment to our listening audience.
Thank you. I hope so.
Kristyn, give us a brief on where you came from.
Wow. I was born and raised in polygamy, just like you, and I'm a seventh generation polygamist, lived it. My mother was the first of my father's 13 wives, and she taught me well that I had to live it or else, the damnation thing. So I lived it with my husband. He had 2 wives, and I finally woke up and flew away, thank God. So,
in polygamy, when we were children, let us take the topic of persecution. What's the first thing that you learned about persecution in the indoctrination of your faith?
In the indoctrination of persecution,
yes,
was that if you don't do what you're told, you're going straight to hell. And boy, that's heavy. That's heavy, heavy, heavy persecution. I was going to say even prosecution, and it is.
Yeah.
I get that God prosecuted us straight to hell if we didn't do what we were going to do, what we were told to do. I grew up with that. I was born into that. My mother was really, really, really good at living her life of misery and putting that smile on her face whenever she was around somebody and keeping sweet and doing what she was told to do. And she was very good at teaching me how scary the world was on the outside. Not only my mother, but all around me in Sunday school, in church, all the neighbors that I grew up with in polygamy, that's all they talked about is how scary the world was on the outside and that they're going to get you. And that if you become friends with them, you better watch out because they will tell you, this is a common saying, they will tell you 100 truths to get you to believe one lie. And it'll be that one lie that will make you go astray and make you apostatize. So it's not safe to hang out with people on the outside. They're going to get you. They don't want you to go to heaven. They're the devil's advocates. They want you to do the wrong things. They want you to make the wrong choices. We are God's temple. We are the right ones. And you need to stay here within this little group that God's going to save and not talk to people on the outside. Besides, they're bad and evil and wicked. And so, yeah, I grew up with that consistently. And I had to go to public schools. I'm going to back up a little bit. My mother told me about what they called the raid. And a lot of people have heard about that. In 1945, they called it a raid when they arrested men for taking child brides over the borders and marrying them. They arrested men for polygamy who were in fact truly marrying younger girls than they were supposed to than legal age, who were trading daughters back and forth. They put not all these men, I'm not saying that because I don't know the facts, but we do know some of the facts, and they were young, too young of girls to be married to these old men. And then they put them in prison with the promise that if they would sign this paper and not live that way anymore ever again. So what I want to call that, going clear back to 1945, was a rescue of the children, of these girls. They wanted to end it way back then. Polygamy was illegal. It has always been illegal, and they wanted to keep it that way for the protection of these young girls and the wives and the children that were going to grow up and propagate the same craziness. And they did their research. The police did it. And yet, we were told it was a raid, and they came after us, and they were taking our rights away, and they were taking, doing this to us. And I grew up with that my whole life. And then I was a baby. My mom was packing me in her arms when she heard on the radio about another raid that they called a raid. again, my sister had been married off at 13 years old to a 27-year-old man, without my parents' consent, by the way. They asked her to wait till she was 16 to get married, and my dad said something recently in the last many years of his life that, oh yes, we encourage our girls to wait till they're 17, 18, maybe they do now, but not when those things were going on. And so anyway, she was married off at 13 years old to an old man who already had plural wives. The government, both Arizona and Utah, and the LDS Church knew from research and studies that there were numerous families on welfare, most of them, I would say, and I don't know that for a fact, but I think research would show that they couldn't provide for those children, that they were having one baby a year and one after another after another. And there were young child brides still, and again, so those men got out of prison, went right back to their families, signed the papers, some of them, and others went right back to their families and propagated more and more and more and more wives, children, families that were going to keep on doing the same.
So weren't you told all the time that this was happening that you were being persecuted for your religion,
yes,
and that these men were martyrs?
Exactly. We were being persecuted. Those wicked people on the outside were persecuting, and there's scripture that backs that up. God's people will be persecuted for righteousness' sake. That's what my mother told me many, many times over when I got beat up from kids at school. It's okay, honey, it's okay. Don't cry. You're being persecuted, and God's proud of you. That kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
My father, along with Dr. Rulon Clark Allred, served time in prison after that raid. Both of them had a child bride. Both of them went forward to tell us that they were persecuted for living God's laws, and they were martyrs.
Exactly. We do know from history, from journals, from research, that they too had child brides and that they were claiming otherwise. And yet we were told over and over that they were being persecuted, that we were being persecuted. The raid has been held over all of the children's, all of our heads, all adult heads. Even to this day, it's been held over us as persecution from the outside for doing what God wants us to, for living our religion, for being great people. And the evil people on the outside don't want that to happen. They want us to end, want the polygamists to end. Of course it's not persecution. The outside, many of them have seen, and especially those that study back when. And so we'll go back to that again too, that part of it, because basically what happened during that, what I want to call rescue, because it was attempted, and when people say raid, it's like, no, let's get rid of that. That gives them the fundamentalist people, and it gave my family and my dad and my parents power over me to make me terrified of leaving, terrified of going into the world, terrified that they were going to come and get me and take me away. And they were, and not just me, my siblings. We actually practiced on how to lie, how to tell lies really well so that we wouldn't be caught, because maybe it was real in their head. Maybe it was real because they had just experienced that threat and had been taken away, many of the women and children from their families for a while, in the law, trying to follow the laws of polygamy being illegal, in the reality of trying to rescue young children from being child brides and trading property and slaves and so forth. And so they had enough evidence that they needed to do something, and they tried. And that's why I call it an attempted rescue. So they used that over and over and over to say, see, we're doing what's right. They're persecuting us. We're God's people, and we're going to be persecuted for righteousness' sake.
In the media, back in that particular era when they had that raid, and in the media when they had the raid at Yearning for Zion Ranch with Warren Jeffs, the people that saw that on the news knew nothing about the mandatory must-live polygamy, eternal damnation if you don't, child brides problem. But they were moved, and there was a great political upstir then. the persecution that we were taught was that if anybody understood how we lived and what we did, the outside world would persecute us because we were God's chosen people and our life was secret and holy. I don't know about you, but I was told that if anybody knew who my daddy was, and Daddy went to jail because I told him, that it would be my fault the family was torn apart and my fault that I was put in an orphanage and never saw my mommy again. That's how dangerous the outside world was, and they would persecute us. That's how my parents taught me.
Mm-hmm. So the fear from those rescues was real. I really believe it was, or I don't think our parents would have worried that they were going to come and haul them off again. So I think that was, I believe that it was real, or we wouldn't have been drilled, like you said, threatened, that if you say something's going to happen, and if you tell this, it will, and I was, and my brothers and sisters were, and Dad would sit down and say, you know, if we have to go in a minute's notice, you better be there. If I call you, you better come now. Don't stop to say why. Don't stop to ask questions. You're going to jump in the car, and we're going to run. The fear was real because to them, this is their religion, like we talked about before. To them, they were being persecuted. To our parents, to the pieces of the raid, they considered the outside world evil, bad, coming after them, and they had this every right to live what Joseph Smith told them to do, that they had to do, or they were going to go to hell, and they were trying to live that life and be polygamous because that's what they believed in. And also backed up by that scripture, wherever it is, that says, you will be persecuted for righteousness' sake. So every time there was anything happening, it's like, again, see, we're God's people. We're being persecuted. Bring it on. We're being persecuted because we're God's people. And that's how my mom justified any persecution. It was like, so that means you're better. That means you're better than they are. That means you're getting persecuted. Yeah, good. So I grew up with that fear. I grew up with constantly worrying that I was going to have to hide under the bed, and I couldn't say that I'd say the wrong thing, just like you said. Maybe I'd accidentally tell that was one of my dad's wives instead of, or that that's my sister instead of my cousin, and my mom being the legal wife, I didn't so much worry about having to say who my dad was. But if I said who the other wives were and said the wrong thing, or where he was at when I wasn't supposed to tell, or that he was sleeping with so-and-so, you know, where's your dad, kid? And, oh, well, he's with, you know, and then I'd get a stomach ache, like you said, the persecution would come over me, and I would die inside, because what if I blew it? I would be responsible, they told me, for my whole family, for Dad being thrown in prison, for our family being separated, for us being torn apart. This was constant fear in my life and all those around me. The fear and the fear to do what God wants you to do, or else. So not only did we have the religious dogma, doctrine telling us going to go to hell, now we have the fear of the world. I was molested when I was between 5 and 8, 9 years old, several times by several people, over and over. I looked back in my life as an adult, a young adult, when I was realizing what really happened and where, why, when, what. And I realized that not once did I not tell about that because I was afraid they'd come after us, that they'd put my dad in prison, that they would separate all of us and tear us apart. I was terrified of the perpetrator who told me that I'd go to hell. I was terrified of the perpetrator who said I was just as bad and I was involved in this and I'd be in trouble if I told. And I was terrified that the perpetrator would do something bad to somebody else if I told. And I was terrified of the perpetrator who said to me that if you tell, then I won't be your friend anymore. And you know how much I love you. You know, all the coercion and everything. And I looked back on that and I thought, people nowadays say that, the pro-polygamists say that if polygamy is decriminalized, that people will tell about the abuses that are going on. It won't be hidden anymore. We won't have that anymore. And it'll be dissipated, as we don't have to hide and all the secrecy and everything. And I thought, what the heck? They'll just give more power, more to all those perverts who are perpetrators more power, because now they won't have that fear of the government to hold over them anymore. And they can continue to hold that other fear that I held, and so now there's nothing to go on. I mean, there's absolutely nothing to go on.
So what you're saying is that the persecution of a God that's going to destroy you if you don't live polygamy, and you mentioned stay sweet, which you should define in a moment, and if you don't behave that way, no matter what, and accept what they tell you to do, you get a prepaid one-way ticket to hell for time and all eternity from your religious point of view. That remains regardless of persecution from the outside.
Right, both ways. You don't have a chance in hell, when you're inside, because you are part of that, what you feel is wrong and wicked, and I'm going to hell, why isn't God protecting me? And so therefore I'm going to hell. I've already been damned to hell, and they told me I would, and I'm going to go to hell, and then if I try to tell anybody, then all hell will break loose. And so, yeah, I wasn't safe on the inside or the outside, and this continued for years. Years that persecution came as much, if not more so, from inside than it did on the outside.
So when a person, any person, but particularly a woman we'll talk about, but any person, young man, decided that they wanted to think for themselves and they did not want to bow to this bloodthirsty and terrifying God, were they persecuted by their family?
Oh, yeah. I mean, anything. And in my childhood, and then I was a teenager, and it was like anytime I questioned, then it was okay in my family. I said that once before, or many times before. It was okay to question, but if I held to any of those wayward thoughts or wicked thoughts, or that I shouldn't live polygamy, or that I don't want to, it wasn't okay. It was considered bad and evil again, and I felt what's the word that would be like the division between pleasing my mom and dad, and how disappointed they were in me, and that no, you have to do this, you have to come back on the back, and if you do that, then there was always that overhanging thing, if I don't do what my dad says, then he won't love me. He won't love me like God won't love me. If I don't do what my mother says, she won't love me. I've got to please them. For me, it was a people-pleasing thing as well. Huge people-pleasing. I wanted to be with my family, and I wanted to do what God wanted, and I wanted to do what my parents wanted. So I was the one busy inside of me going, let me out of here. And outside going, okay, I'll be good. Okay, I'll keep sweet. That means don't rock the boat. Don't think it for yourself. It means shut that up. That's what that means. And I will do my best to fit in. That was me.
And not doing so is considered wicked. And those
oh
evil
my
thoughts.
Gosh, yeah. I thought when I was younger about how bad I wanted to. I was very young, in my early teens, when I wanted to go to Haight-Ashbury and join the hippies, because they looked like they loved each other. And I only got to see glimpses of that on TV, because that was very monitored. And it was like, whoa, they're singing, they're dancing, wow, that was cool. And I heard about all the free love. And of course I thought that meant really, genuinely, this kind of love. And I was like totally attracted by all that good, what looked happy and seemed to be wonderful. And I wanted to go so bad I couldn't die. Besides that, no one would love me. And that would be a great way to just go out in the world and find myself and have a baby. Just pick a really handsome guy and have a baby and have nobody telling me where, why, when, what I have to do. And do you know what happened to me when I had those thoughts? I would beat myself up because I was wicked for having those thoughts, and I hope nobody'd ever hear me have those thoughts. And I thought I actually had a split personality, that something was really wrong with me, that I would want to even consider such an evil, horrible, wicked thing, that my dad said those were evil, terrible, horrible, wicked people. And how dare you think that you would want to go join them. So yeah, it was a constant persecution of my own thinking, of my own thoughts, of my own way. It's like, okay, back on the straight and narrow, get back here, there's only one way, and that's the only way, and you better do it or else. Or else was always over my head, or else. That's persecution.
Explain how the love of our fathers who held the priesthood aligned with our acceptance of God.
My dad's obvious favorite children were the ones who were not only kissing his ass, but really, really busy kissing God's ass too. Whatever God said, showing up at priesthood meeting, paying their tithing, doing whatever they were told to do by their higher priesthood, which would have been my dad or Uncle Roland, who was the leader. It was obvious who the favorite wives were. They were also doing that. Those that gave him a hard time. Oh, wow. I even heard about some of those wicked women. And so if they tried to bring to him heartaches or jealousy, and this is later in his life when he had shut that wall and said, I don't want to hear about it, I can't hear about it, I've got more than, leave me alone, and you don't have a right to feel that way because I was good to you and I did give you your time and so needed it more than you did, and I listened to those kinds of things. I heard that and saw that, and those poor women, well, I heard other wives talk about how bad they were, about how, and it was obvious Dad would punish them in a sense. I mean, he didn't want to go over there. He didn't want to see him. He didn't want to deal with that. I don't have to either. I'm a good man. I don't have to deal with that. I'm doing the best I can. That was one of his very favorite things to say. That would be when he made a mistake, instead of an apology, it's like, I'm doing the best I can. Just shut up and behave yourself. And so
that if you didn't fall in line with what was expected of you, you were wicked and you were persecuted from within.
Oh, yeah. Within my own self, because I was told that all around me. And then I would say, wow, that must be a wicked kid. I'm getting molested. I'm getting beat up. I'm getting, my neighbors who were all my cousins leave me out, and they're calling me names, and they're accusing me of stealing, and they're saying I'm this, and they're saying I'm that. And the men, especially the young boys, I felt, not my brothers. I think my brothers were for the most part good to me, but the cousin man who I thought were all little mini gods walking around with their, I'm better than you and I'm better than anybody around here. I mean, they really took it to heart about their supremacy, their little handful of God-chosen supremacy, white people who were going to become gods of their own worth, and they treated me, I felt, like crap. Like I didn't even exist. You're a girl, for hell's sakes, and you certainly can't play ball with us, and get lost, kid. And it was consistently, so I was persecuted inside, for heaven's sake, as much or more so than on the outside. And yet I grew up believing I had to stay there and deal with it and suffer no matter what, because that was going to get me to heaven.
Define the difference in value between a son and a daughter.
I guess, again, that depends on families. I think my father loved his daughters and he loved his sons. I really believe it. I felt his love. I often felt his love, but he knew his sons were going to carry his name. He would say that over and over. His sons are going to get his inheritance. I didn't get any, he told me once. You don't get my inheritance. You belong to your husband and his family. Again, once you're married, that's it. You're out of here. You don't have any rights. My mother didn't.
And the priesthood. Tell us about the priesthood.
Oh, absolutely. Priesthood is big, big, big.
The son gets the priesthood. The women don't get the priesthood. And the women have to do what the priesthood holder says. And the women have to do what even young, sometimes they're young sons. My father would leave and put one of the sons in charge instead of my mother, for heaven's sakes, or instead of another mother. It was like, he's in charge. He's the oldest person in the house with the priesthood. You do what he says to do. You follow and obey him. Setting up those male egos, those chauvinist men who think they're better than, and they can do and say whatever they want to say. So the dual standard started from the day you were born, because you were born a girl. And you had less rights from the day of your birth because you were female. And you had less of everything. And it was not a choice. You were born there. And it was mandatory that you obediently comply. That being said, what happened when somebody got old enough to say, I don't want to comply and I don't want to believe in this religion, how did the family treat them then?
I watched that happen a few times in my young lifetime. People come and go. It didn't work for them. They might have been converts, and they'd say, as they got in and found out this isn't the truth, or that's a lie, or this isn't working for me, or I don't believe it, and they'd leave. That didn't seem quite as devastating as somebody who was born into it, because we were the ones who were always told that if you're born into it, you're better than anybody else. You deserve this wonderful life, and God called you to live this way. So I watched people come and go, not a lot, but I felt bad when they left, because like all of us, we were now they got the truth, now they're going to hell, that's it. They had the truth, and they're bad because they had it. I mean, that's worse than somebody who's never had the truth, never been told the gospel or born into it. It's bad for those outside. They're all bad and wicked, but once you've had that truth and you turn on it, there goes more accountability, more damnation, more hell to pay. And so, yes.
So they were evil? And they were rejected?
And we judged them. I judged them. It was like, without trying to. We're not supposed to judge, and we were told not to. But we all knew they were going to hell. That's the rule. I mean, it was like, that's what it says, for heaven's sakes, in the scriptures, what Joseph Smith said. They are apostates. They left. They had the truth. That's it. They're going to hell. And in many cases, those people were shunned. I watched families never be talked to ever again, by the inside persecuting them because they didn't think and believe like they were told to. Like somebody, their missionary in the Aura group or their whoever taught them, and they'd leave and they would say, oh, and not only that, Rebecca, but the lies would start, the horrible, terrible lies. There's one woman who left. I was an adult when she left. And I still hear the lies about that woman to this day. She's one of my best friends, and the lies that even her own ex-husband talked and told about, he convinced her children that she was a whore, like other people that we've talked to and have heard about, that he convinced her that she was sleeping around, that she was a slut, that she was vagabond, and they used this thing to justify in Brigham Young's teachings, where he wrote that if you don't teach your daughters, and if they don't become polygamous wives, then they will be harlots walking in the streets. And this is the lie. I mean, my word, what horrible, terrible things. And then when I left, lies were told, and I'd hear, and it would just be heartbreaking. The lies from people who left. I heard things that I now know were absolute lies about people who left. And then I come to find out from somebody who was an eyewitness on what really happened and what really took place. The persecution was violent inside.